Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast, the podcast dedicated to simplifying the commercial real estate industry for the masses. Each week, we sit down with industry experts to dissect the many facets of commercial real estate and extract valuable lessons you can apply to your business. Whether you're a new or seasoned business owner or investor, the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast will be your go-to resource for all your commercial real estate needs. Now, here are your hosts, Raphael Collazo and Jeff Walston.
Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Academy podcast. I'm your host, Raphael Collazo, here with my co-host, Jeff Walston. How's it going, my friend?
Well, great. I hope all the listeners out there, you guys are you're killing it this work week, and you're making deals and you're investing and you're still pushing that needle forward. I wanted to congratulate you and thank you for listening to the podcast. But on my note over here, business is great. It's still moving. I'm excited to finish the year out strong. And personal life couldn't be better. It might be, I just don't see it, but right now it's great. And excited about Raphael's wedding. So it's coming up in November, as this probably will be airing maybe after or during the wedding. We're not sure there, but it'll definitely be around there. But other than that, how's it going over there for you, Raphael?
Good, man. Good. Yeah. We'll just do a huge blast of the last several episodes on my wedding day, just so you guys have a bunch. No, I'm just kidding. No, we won't do that. But it is coming up, and we're really excited about being able to celebrate with you and everyone else in Puerto Rico is where it's going to be, and really excited to begin a life with someone. You had a wedding earlier this year, so I'm looking forward to kind of having the married bliss, as they say. So. But speaking of just a great conversation, we really did have a phenomenal conversation with Norm Doucet. He's the head of America's Flexible Workspace at Cushman Wakefield. We had a phenomenal conversation. He's been with Cushman the last several years, really building out their Flexible Workspace strategy division. He comes from a strategy consulting background, and so he kind of has leveraged that experience into now getting into the strategy side on the brokerage end to be able to support, their frontline brokers as they start, providing additional services to their clients. And one thing we mainly talked about in this discussion is the office landscape and how it's shifted since COVID. And, as more and more employers have started to rethink how they're going to come back to the office, this idea of flexible workspace has become ever more prevalent. And again, it's a concept that has been around for many, many, many years, but it's now become much more of a mainstream type of idea as far as, what clients are asking for on the brokerage end. And so, we touched a little bit on, what flexible workspace is, how it's evolved since COVID, how the evolution of the space has really transitioned over the last several years, what initiatives him and his company, Cushman Wakefield, have really taken on in order to become a leader in that space as it becomes a much more prevalent topic amongst the commercial real estate industry. And finally, we touched on, his foresight as far as what the industry is going to look like over the next 5 to 10 years, the evolution of the office space, and then ultimately, the social media aspect. One of the reasons that we were able to connect through Norm was through LinkedIn, and he's been very heavily involved on the platform and been able to provide a lot of great insight to the industry. And so he kind of explains his insights pertaining to how he leverages the platforms that he operates in to then provide as much value as he can to a broader audience as a whole. So I thought it was a great discussion. Norm is a super personable guy, and I'm looking forward to eventually making it up to Chicago. That's where he's headquartered at. And so, looking forward to potentially see him, grab a brew, and, continue to maintain a good relationship long term. So, Jeff, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm excited for everyone to listen to this podcast. And I didn't get to get on here, but I respect everyone's time just as I respect my own. So I want Raphael to go ahead and, so we both value everyone's time. So he went ahead and did the podcast without me. But other than that, I wanted to say we appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. It is a free podcast. I say that over and over, but it is. And because one thing that stands out, and one the main reasons we created this podcast is to inform the masses about commercial real estate. And in order to do that, we implore you to go out and recommend the podcast to at the very least one person. How about 5 of your friends? They might enjoy the podcast. You might not think they're interested, but they could, it might awaken their investment gene that they didn't know they have, and see the benefits of commercial real estate and how it can change your life. So if you guys can recommend the podcast to one of your friends or colleagues, we greatly appreciate it. Raphael?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll kind of reiterate what you just said. I mean, it really does make a huge difference by you guys sharing with someone you think would gain value from it. We talk about the network effect, and that, if you connect one person to the podcast, they could connect 5 people, and then they connect however many people. And it just creates this web effect where they can continue to reach a broader audience. And that's ultimately our goal. So if you could share it with someone that that obviously makes a big difference. And along with that, if you guys don't mind, we would greatly appreciate it if you leave a 5-star review. It does make a huge impact in our ability to reach a broader audience as well. So if you guys don't mind, don't do this while you're driving or doing something that requires your attention. But if you're able to go to Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review, or maybe even Spotify, and do the same thing. It does make a huge impact in our ability to reach the broadest audience possible. So thank you all so much for your support. It really does mean the world to us. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the podcast. Well, hey, Norm, good morning. Good to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, where are you tuning in from today, Norm?
Chicago, Illinois.
Awesome.
The global headquarters of Cushman Wakefield.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a beautiful city. I had a chance to be out there to visit some friends back in 2014. And I've been back since, just to explore the city, especially during the time where it's nicer out. We do the Riverwalk area. So it's really a really cool city. I really enjoy Chicago very much.
Yeah, it's a really great place. Not so much in February, but this time of year, it's absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's great to see. We're kind of on the tail end of COVID. So the streets are a little bit more crowded. Our festivals all happen this year, including Lollapalooza. So it looks like, city's kind of getting back to quote unquote normal.
That's great. No, and it's good to see. And I went to New York City relatively recently, just this past year, and you could see the vibrancy starting to come back to major cities. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what that means for the future as far as work and also play. So that's and we're obviously honored to have you on the show. I know you're an extremely busy individual. So what we typically do when we first get started with the podcast is we like to learn a little bit more about the person that's across the table from us. So if you don't mind kind of sharing a little bit about your backstory, I think that'd be awesome.
Yeah, sure. So I'll try to keep it brief. So I'm originally not from Chicago. I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina. And I was born and raised there, went to college there, both grad school and undergrad. Joined the Marine Corps. So I spent about 10 years in the Marine Corps, left the Marine Corps, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. So I ended up being a sales rep for a sales company for a while. So I saw a lot of surgeries as a result of that, which made me terrified of surgery. And then I got into consulting. So my background really is in strategy consulting, strategic consulting. Did that for a very long time. And Cushman Wakefield was actually a client of mine for about 5 years before I joined the firm. I joined the firm in 2020 in January, so right before the pandemic, when we thought at the time, flexible office or co-working was going to really be a core part of our strategy. So I joined the firm to do strategy and operations. COVID hit. We made some changes, and I took over the team I guess in April of 2020, and we went through the pandemic, and now we're on the other side of it, and it's just been a really interesting time. I hate to use the word exciting because of the pandemic, but it was challenging in a very positive way. I think I at least at our firm, I saw across the board, across our platform, and everyone sort of rallying, coming together to support our clients through tough times, and supporting our team members and employees as well. So it made me love this place even more than I did when I joined.
That's awesome. Yeah. And like you said, you definitely know the word exciting is definitely, not necessarily what we use in this particular situation, but anytime there's change going on, it is an exciting time in that there's different creative ways that you can solve problems And ultimately, that's, I'm sure, why Cushman brought you on board, because of your experience in that arena. And the consulting side, is obviously a very interesting career. I actually came from a consulting background myself as well. I was in IT consulting for 5 years before I got into the brokerage space. So I can't tell you how much I've, been able to apply the lessons I've learned in my experience now into, more of a real estate environment. And, I feel like the skill set can translate very well. So.
Yeah, I agree. I'll make one point on consulting. One of the cool things about consulting is that you get to see, at least I did, different industries. So I spent a lot of time in retail and CPG, a little bit of time in healthcare, a little bit of time in real estate. And so you get to, I think the beauty of it is that you get to leverage the unique things about different industries and bring it to the industry that you're working in, right? Business all kind of works the same. Every industry has its own nuances. And the beauty of it, I think you get a holistic view of just how the ecosystem works. And so I think it's made me a better leader as a result of like spending all that time doing consulting.
I can only imagine, definitely. No, so what in particular was what attracted you to the commercial real estate industry? Because you had mentioned in your consulting role, it was strategy consulting. You consulted for a variety of different companies in a variety of different industries. What was one of the reasons, I guess, that it kind of attracted you to the commercial real estate side?
Yeah, it was simply, it looked very challenging. I will say, I say to people all the time, I learned something new about commercial real estate every single day that I'm in it. It's one of the oldest industries in the US, right? And so I think that at least the consulting that I did before I joined the firm, it's the leadership, the senior executives trying to find ways to transform the industry, to make it work better for clients. And so that was what drew me to it. And that's why I loved consulting for it before I joined the firm, because you've got, in any real estate firm, you've got all of these service lines, and it's how do they all work together. And what we say at Cushman Wakefield is that every day we try to become more one Cushman Wakefield. So to take our brokerage services and our global occupier services and our asset services and our capital markets and our PDS, project delivery services, and how do we create customized or bespoke solutions for our clients that make them successful, not only in the real estate realm, but that actually serve their business objectives, their business strategies. And so that is what excites me. I think real estate touches everything as well, right? It touches work, it touches play, it touches everything in between. And so it's sort of, from my perspective at least, real estate sort of one of the foundational pieces, or one of the pieces of glue that kind of holds the society together. And so I loved being associated with it, and I love, actually more than anything, working in it today.
That's awesome. No, you're right. And you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier, is the opportunity for change within the industry. I feel like there is that, especially, now with how we're rethinking the workplace in some capacity. Obviously, there's still going to be a strong demand for long-term, workforce housing for office as well. But the flexible piece is coming into play now that, before was somewhat more of a novel idea, although it was definitely changing. I feel nowadays it's probably going to be a big part of, the evolution going forward. One thing I was kind of curious about is that transition. One of the things that, when we interview all the guests that we have had on the podcast, some came from the real estate background. They maybe had members of their family that were affiliated with the real estate industry, and some just were completely unaffiliated with the industry. It seems like you were falling into that category a little bit, and I know I did as well. I guess, what was one of the struggles you faced as you made that transition? And then I guess, what are some of the lessons learned along the way to kind of, compart to other people?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest struggles that I faced coming into this is really sort of understanding how real estate works, right? So the value chain of real estate. And my challenge was, I was looking at it not from a client's perspective, but from, like, I will say, a consultant's perspective, where I'm sort of looking from the top down, not necessarily from the bottom up. And so it made it more difficult to kind of understand how all of the pieces, all of the capabilities we have in our platform fit together to serve clients, right? And so it was interesting because I'm a client-centric person, but coming from the world of consulting, it's like I know a thing, and therefore I must tell you my thing. And so when I stopped doing that and started listening and started making more outreach to my colleagues, and I got to understand kind of how things work. And I think it's just natural, right, to get to be very focused on what you're doing, or to be siloed in what you're doing. And I think our firm has done a really good job of breaking down those silos and forcing all of us to think more broadly around the client's problem, and then finding solutions to that instead of trying to push something onto a client. And I see it more so in our brokerage community more than anything, right? Our brokers, I believe, over the last 2-3 years that I've been here, have done a great job of, instead of saying like, hey, I just want to close this tenant rep deal or this agency deal and get paid, they've done a really great job of leveraging all of the resources at their disposal to give the client a holistic solution, of which a transaction is a part, right? And so I think I'm fortunate to work with some of the best brokerage professionals in the world, I believe. And I think, again, that's, for me, has been really rewarding. I think the lessons learned that I would say is, I think I hit it on a little bit earlier. It's taking that step back and looking at the problems or issues from the client's perspectives. There are commonalities between clients, but each client has a unique situation based on their business objectives, their strategy, their challenges in the marketplace, et cetera. And if you do that, you're able to, I think, serve them better.
Yeah, I know. Providing that bespoke approach, like you mentioned, because each client's going to be different. And I imagine if and this is something that's happened in my business, is if you tailor your approach to each client and you serve their needs, you become that trusted advisor, which, that's ultimately what we want to become, is that if they have a need or a thought about real estate, you're the first person they call. In this case, and it would be Cushman Wakefield. And obviously there's a suite of products that you can offer them and services that you can offer them to best suit whatever their goals are. And you want to be involved in those discussions, even if, let's say, the primary discussion isn't even real estate per se, but real estate touches it. You want to be involved in that discussion, because that's what trusted advisors do, right? It's like calling an accountant, It's calling a lawyer, it's involving someone who is a professional that you can trust for the rest of your career. So
yep,
it's a smart approach. So one thing I'm now curious about is, obviously you are, the head of Americas for Flexible Workspace. And, I know we have talked about, in the past, co-working pre-COVID, obviously COVID hit, and now it's become kind of morphed into, kind of a new way of thinking. I was kind of curious, what would you define as flexible workspace? And I guess, how have you seen it shift since what we've experienced in 2020 and beyond?
Yeah, so I would make flexible workspace, I think, is a more broad term. In the Americas, we've sort of narrowed our scope. We call it flexible office now, but it essentially, what it is two parts, I believe. It is sort of non-traditional office around with respect to a lease, right? So it's a shorter term, which is one key element of flexible office. The other key element is sort of plug and play, right? The expectation is that your space will be fitted out already, and you'll just plug your computer in and be ready to go. So you don't have that piece of a traditional lease where you're having to build out your space and do all that stuff that's already done for you. And then the key part that I think is getting a lot more attention today is the experiential part of it, right? So having not only your company's logos or your company's culture be a part of it, it's more broad than that, right? It's how do you connect your team members within your space, but more broadly, how do you connect tenants across, if you're looking at it from a landlord or investor perspective, how do you connect your tenants across floors, more broadly within the building, which goes to amenitization. So those are the key sort of differentiators that existed pre-COVID. What I will say is during COVID and this post-COVID world, those unique attributes are temporary, and we're seeing that. We're seeing things like spec suites, for instance, right, which would be considered flexible workspace, but not necessarily flexible office as we define it. We're also seeing on the investor landlord side a push to differentiate their assets by amenitization, right? So they're programming their spaces differently. They're designing or redesigning the amenity spaces within their buildings to attract new tenants, but also to retain the tenants that they already have and elevate the experience in their buildings, right? So the exciting part about this is that I think we were seeing some of these trends before COVID hit, and this was going to happen anyway, but I think COVID accelerated some of the changes that we're seeing in the flexible workspace, flexible office sector.
That makes sense. So are you seeing a lot more landlords now deciding to, just reconfigure their entire building to fit this particular model? Or is it one of those things where you're seeing a slower shift to maybe if it's a multi-tenant office building, having several floors kind of follow this model, whereas others are long-term? Or I guess, how are you seeing that evolve in the broader landscape?
Yeah, I think from a demand perspective, right, and I would say demand perspective versus execution, right, because there's a whole ton of complicated work that goes into that. From the demand perspective, we're seeing investors and landlords ask for this more. So they're saying, all right, I need amenities in my building that are state of the art, and I need flexible office in my building. And that could mean, I want a flexible office provider. We call them flex operators in my building, or I want to do it myself. So from a demand perspective, we're seeing a lot of that across the board. From an execution perspective, I think that's the tail end of it, because this is new, right? And so every single deal that we're working on is bespoke, right? It is, there's a ton of work in it, because you're taking a landlord that's used to, and then there's a capital markets viewpoint on this as well, but you're taking a landlord who's used to getting a 5-year lease, 10-year lease, 15-year lease, and that's it, right? Then, you do your build out, you work out your lease terms, and then you're done, versus a flexible office or amenitization scenario in which, if flex providers don't want to take leases anymore, because that's why a lot of them struggled or went under during the pandemic. So they want management agreements. Okay, so a landlord's like, okay, well, that's not guaranteed revenue. And so there's a lot of complicated work into trying to get it to look like something that's market rent. And so there's a ton of work in that. And so we're working through that with landlords and investors. And I think we'll get there. We have done some deals, and I think we'll continue to do more deals, but it's going to take a while for that to kind of work its way through the system. But I do believe that, 5 years from now, it will be more common in the US, I should say. In Europe, it's a little bit different. They're more accustomed to management agreements in EMEA than they are in the US, but I think the US will get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that. And obviously the one of the value propositions for a flexible workspace is I know for a lot of landlords out there, it's tough to, fit a space every time a tenant moves out. It's very capital intensive. Whereas in these scenarios, you can fit a space with, base configuration, and then, you provide it. Is it typically fully furnished, or are there, typically agreements where, we could provide the furniture at a cost, or how does that typically, and how's that evolved, I guess? Yeah.
So if you're working with a flex operator like a WeWork or Industrious, it's fully fitted out, right? So the FF&E is a part of that flexible office provider's model, right? So it's all fitted out already. If a landlord or investor wants to do it themselves, then FF&E becomes an issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are companies out there that actually do this, so it's not a huge issue. But you're absolutely right. You've got the plug and play already built out space ready to move in on day one, so you can execute a move in a lot faster. You can also execute a ramp up or ramp down faster as well, right? And so that is a value prop for flexible office. I would also say another value prop from a landlord investor perspective is you can bring in, if you've got small medium business in your building, you can bring them into flexible office space, and as they grow, they can grow into a longer term lease as they grow, right? So that is, I think from an investor landlord perspective, that's a really key, it's a very key sort of differentiator for having flexible office in your building.
Yeah, you become almost an incubation, like you're incubating businesses that eventually could absorb larger footprints within the building. That's
right.
Interesting.
And there's a whole lot of work around, where is that tipping point, for a company that is in flexible office that wants to go longer term lease. And we're seeing some interesting trends, especially in the tech space. And I'll give you a quick example. So usually, probably a year ago, your average tech company would say, all right, we're going to put, a team of, 15 or 20 in a flexible office space. And then when that team goes to 25, 30, we'll look at something more traditional. That's now increased to, hey, we're going to put a team of 50 to 75 in flexible office. And when that tips to, like 80 to 100, then we'll start looking at a longer term solution, longer term leasing solution. So we're seeing things fluctuate. And it's based on back to office and, sort of the uncertainty around the economy these days. But so we're busy trying to help our brokers and our clients figure this out.
Definitely. No, that's amazing. So you kind of alluded to the some of the initiatives that you guys are taking on to, help your clients better serve the ultimate tenant and vice versa, right? Just that symbiotic relationship. What are some of the initiatives that you're kind of excited about that obviously you and Cushman are taking on to kind of become a leader in that space? Because like you said, over the next 5 to 10 years, there will continue to be an evolution, and the hope is that you guys are leading the charge when it comes to that.
Yeah. So for us, it's all about continuing to make our overall platform better. And so from a flexible office perspective, what we're trying to do is sort of some of the following things. So partnerships are key to making that happen. Right. So we really form, I think, really strong partnerships. We have a partnership with WeWork, for instance. We've got a partnership with other flexible office providers. The partnership with WeWork is really around being market leading. So creating those new solutions, being on the cutting edge or leading edge of creating bespoke solutions for clients, both on the occupier side and on the landlord investor side. And so, WeWork does some things really well. We do some things really well. And so that's, combining those superpowers, I think will be very beneficial for us. Internally, what we're trying to do is leverage technology to democratize what we do in flexible office for our brokerage professionals. So we're building some technology platforms to make it easier to find flexible office space, which has been traditionally hard to do, unless you go to an aggregator or something like that. So we're doing that. We're also beefing up our advisory capabilities, right? And so when an occupier or a landlord or investor wants to do something, we want to make sure that we're able to provide them the quickest, most comprehensive, advice to help them and help our brokerage professionals help them solve for their problems.
Definitely. No, that's amazing. And like you said, supporting the brokerage side is obviously a big part of the initiative as well. Like, because you said, I mean, I know in situations, and I'm not part of a large brokerage, we're more of a boutique brokerage, but I've definitely had a lot of calls from people who are like, hey, we need, this amount of office space, but, we're looking for more of a flexible option. And, I can imagine at a large scale that you guys operate at, those requests are starting to come in more and more, and being able to effectively service your clients, obviously back to the advisory role, maintaining that strong advisory position with your clients, so that, going forward, they know that if their needs change, you guys will shift with them to help them accomplish their goals.
Yeah, and I'll say this about at least our organization within Cushman and Wakefield. And my philosophy, ergo my team's philosophy, is that our clients are our brokers professionals, our GOS account directors, etc. They have the clients. We are a part of our colleagues' teams to help deliver the best solutions. And so I think that philosophy has been very successful for us. Is that my team isn't out looking for clients, right? That's not our role, our purpose here. Our purpose is to create the best part of the flexible office platform within our larger platform to help our brokers and client-facing professionals do the best work for their clients possible.
That's amazing, really. So one thing I'm kind of curious about, and this is something we touch on the podcast quite a bit, and this is pertaining to the digital side of our industry. Historically, as you probably know, I mean the real estate side, the real estate business has been very slow to adopt different types of technologies. Obviously on the brokerage end, digital marketing and other social platforms has been an integral part of the marketing that I do in my business, and I know other professionals as well. You've been recognized as well in the LinkedIn side, if I'm not mistaken, with the CREI summit. Kind of curious about what is the logic that you're taking as far as the social side is concerned, and then where do you see that hopefully helping you in your career going forward?
If I understand the question correctly, you're asking about the social media side of things.
Yeah, digital marketing and
yeah.
social platforms, exactly.
Yes, so I think if you're looking at it from like a team or company perspective, digital marketing is huge, right? It can be huge, I would say, and I think it's super important. But again, as I said earlier, I think you have to look at any capability that you're trying to leverage that's out there from the perspective of the client. How's this going to serve the client? So, or how's this going to help clients recognize that you should come to us for whatever it is that you're looking for? So that's number one. So I think that if you're looking at leveraging, digital marketing, social media, et cetera, you should look at it from that perspective. You're trying to generate awareness, right, of your capabilities, and you're trying to or generate awareness that there's a space that you can have. But I still think that the power of that doesn't reside with the marketers. The power resides within the business, right? And so if there's and I use brokers as an example, because I think they're sort of like out in the field every day, doing the hard work for our firm. It's the marketing or digital side or flexible office side or whatever the subject matter expert is. It's their job to help our brokers and client-facing professionals understand the capabilities and how to leverage those capabilities to serve the broker, to serve the client. Marketing doesn't exist for marketers, right? Flexible office doesn't exist for the people on my team. It exists to serve clients. And I think that is, at least in my experience doing strategy consulting, it's one of the pitfalls of leveraging any kind of technology is we kind of let the technologists run with it, right? So like, hey, we're going to build an instance of Salesforce. And then we let the Salesforce people run it instead of the business, like saying, this is what we want, build it this way. And so I think that we do a really great job of having business lead initiatives here. And to go back to the original point, again, I think that social and all that stuff is really great, but I post on social media in service of my firm, like on LinkedIn or whatever. And like, we all have to have that mindset, right? And if you're a broker, obviously you're trying to build your business and make people see you as that trusted advisor, but you do that within the service of the firm, right?
Of course. No, yeah. It's and that's the broad approach that the company and you have taken to, build awareness pertaining to whatever initiatives you guys are championing. And again, that's, these platforms serve a purpose. And I appreciate you saying the build it and they will come approach. I feel like that happens a lot in tech, where it's like, it sounds like a good idea, and then you build it and you're like, oh wait, no one's really going to use it, or the way they use it is completely different than what you originally thought. And so, having that mindset where it's like taking a step back and realizing who am I trying to serve by engaging in this type of, this solution essentially, or this, in this case, social or digital marketing or whatever else. And then from there, I think it'll be a more effective way to be able to build notoriety for yourself or for the people that you ultimately are trying to serve. So that's a very smart approach.
Yeah, technology is just a tool. Real estate, commercial real estate is a people business, right? And so it's our people that drive that, and it's our job as subject matter experts in whatever it is that we do to provide those tools and to help them again be able to leverage those tools in a way that best serves them and their clients.
Absolutely.
I'll get off of the soapbox now, but that's sort of like a pet peeve of mine.
No, I mean, you're there to be of service to others. And I think that people understand that, people can tell that whether someone's being genuine about something as well. And again, it resonates with people. And if it resonates with people, then ultimately it's serving its purpose, especially if you target the appropriate parties. So, one of the things that, we love to share on this podcast is, we're all very voracious readers. I love to read a variety of different books in a variety of different industries. Our listeners do as well. I'm kind of curious, if you have, maybe one or two books that you have, really valued in your lifetime, and it doesn't have to be real estate related. Some of my favorite books and my most impactful books in my life are not real estate related. They're completely different than what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I was kind of wanted to ask you, what were some of the most impactful books you've ever read?
Yeah. So my favorite book, I've got a couple, but my favorite book of all time is a book called The Fusion of Innovations. I can't remember who the author is, quite frankly, but it's a study of, you've heard of the Gartner hype curve and all that stuff, right? But it's an actual like real life study on how innovations or changes, new things kind of work their way through society. And so it goes through, I think the first use case is there is in some immunization or birth control thing in Peru, and the government says this would be a great idea, and so they go out to the hinterland, and it fails utterly, and they realize like, oh, wait a minute, we thought that the men in power, the ones that made those decisions in all these tribes, and it's actually the women that make it, and so they had to go back and like redo it, and then it worked. And it takes examples like that all the way to, technology, the iPhone and all that stuff. And it really gives a study on how humans work, right? And how to essentially incorporate change in a way that will be successful across the board. And so that's like one of my favorite books. You should definitely read it. It's only like 300 or 400 pages. The second book that I love, it's called The Personal MBA. I think it's a guy named Kaufman that wrote it.
Yeah.
That book is amazing. I do not have an MBA. I have a master's in English literature. And so it's like, do I go to grad school to get my MBA or not? And I struggle with it. And so I bought this book, essentially, and it basically taught me accounting and taught me all these like really sort of core business concepts. And it's amazing. And whether or not you have an MBA or not, I recommend that you read it. It's a fantastic book. And then I'm a huge history nerd, specifically around the Civil War. So I'll read anything at all about the Civil War. So there's a great book about Pickett's Charge that I love. And, there's some books about Abraham Lincoln that I love, some books about some of the Southern generals that I love. So anything history related, specifically Civil War, but definitely The Fusion of Innovations and Personal MBA, I think are really great books for life in general, but also for business.
That's amazing. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to reading The Fusion of Innovation. And it kind of, the idea that you kind of referenced there is the change management piece, which I know that, it's impressive. When I was in the IT side of things, that was one of the biggest struggles we had, was trying to, put people in a position to succeed with this new technology when they had been using a certain technology for many, many, many years. And, the kind of the battles that occurred as a result of us trying to, make it work for what they did. And really, like that you had mentioned too, sometimes you don't even know, even if you could prepare as much as you can for something, but until you put it out there, and realize, oh, wait, maybe some of our assumptions were not exactly what we had thought, then you ultimately pivot. But yeah, there's been many times in my life where that's the case. So I'm really looking forward to reading that book in particular. And I agree with you on the history side. I love reading biographies, and I just recently read one on Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. It was
I've read
very long book, but it was very insightful. And it's one of those books that, you don't really understand the dynamics that occurred until you dive into his past and get a feel for, the decisions that were made and why they were made, so that's one of the things that I really love about biographies, in particular biographies about presidents and captains of industry, because you start thinking about, now I kind of get what their logic was when they were put in this position in their lifetime. And, you may not come across the exact same situation or be in the same position, but you can draw on those experiences in the future, and hopefully you can make maybe better decisions going forward, or, at least have a frame of reference or a lens with which to view a problem that can potentially lead you in a different direction than you would have if you hadn't read it. So,
yeah, that's very well said. When we look at Grant or whatever, we see the outcome, right? Like, he won the Civil War, he was president of the United States, but you don't really understand or learn the lessons that I think are good for an individual until you dive into the story and see like this situation, he had to make this decision or that decision or that decision. And then you understand more about like how he thought and like what he learned. And so or she learned. So it's really, really awesome.
Absolutely. And you realize sometimes there's shortcomings. I mean, we're all humans, right? So we're not perfect. And then Grant's situation, for example, he blindly trusted individuals, and that can cause issues, especially if you're not checking trust but verify type of situation, because you're in a hierarchy like the U.S. forces, and you say something, it gets done. Whereas in a more, fluid structure like politics or other things, there's more, it's more color. There's more color at play when it comes to the way it operates. And so, kind of taking a narrow focus as opposed to more broad focus to really understand the environment you're in can cause issues. And so, you kind of learn about that. You say, hey,
Yep.
It's interesting.
There's a military term called inspect what you expect. Just trust but verify, right? And he wasn't good at that.
No. He's like, do it, and he expected it done, and then it just never happened. That's funny. So, we greatly appreciate your time, Norm. Obviously, we understand you're a busy man, and we're really looking forward to hearing what our audience has to say about the podcast episode. I know I gained a lot of value from our discussion, so I'm looking forward to hearing feedback as well. One thing we like to do near the end of the podcast episode is we like to ask our guests to contribute something to what we call the CRE treasure chest. It's a repository of resources that we like to make available to our audience. And, we've had people contribute helpful PDFs, Excel sheets, a variety of different things that that the guest feels would be of value to the audience. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to share what you're willing to contribute today.
Yeah, so we publish every quarter something we call the State of Flex. So and over the pandemic, it's actually gotten more comprehensive. And so there'll be some stuff about workplace strategy in there. There'll be some stuff about flexible office in there. And it's not voluminous, but it's also not a couple pages either. So I think that would be a very good thing to add to the treasure chest. So looking forward to putting that in there.
Absolutely. And you guys typically release this on a quarterly basis, or is this it is?
It's a quarterly basis, and generally it's internal or to our clients specifically, but we'll go through and make it ready for public consumption.
Oh, that's great. No, we greatly appreciate that, because I know you guys, spend a lot of resources into, generating this data, and then, writing reports to help your clients and the broader audience as a whole understand, the movement of different property types and different initiatives that you guys are taking on. So obviously we greatly appreciate you being willing to do that.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Definitely. No, well, Norm, we greatly appreciate your time. Like I said before, if people want to learn more about you, or maybe just connect in some capacity, obviously you've provided a ton of value, and the fact that you're also in the strategy side of brokerage. I don't know how many, we haven't had too many interviewees that have been in this arena, and so I'm sure we do appeal to a broad audience, but a lot of the people that we also talk to, or as far as the podcast is concerned, are, you know, younger people in their career that are looking for different opportunities within the commercial real estate industry. So if they were interested in learning more about what you guys do, how would you encourage them to reach out?
Yeah, this was the easiest way to do it, but hit me up on LinkedIn. I think I'm Norman Doucet on LinkedIn. I'm Norm Doucet, internal to Cushman Wakefield, so it gets weird sometimes. But I'm Norman Doucet. Just hit me up on LinkedIn. You can find me.
Absolutely. And for those of you guys who are listening, we're going to go ahead and include the link in the show notes below. So if you guys are watching this on YouTube, it'll be in the description. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it'll be in the description as well. So again, thanks so much for your time, man. We really do appreciate it. If you guys are listening to this in a podcast format, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts, we would greatly appreciate it if you could leave a 5-star review. It really does make the world a difference, and it's really helped us with our reach as far as the podcast is concerned. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, we will greatly appreciate it if you could like and subscribe to this channel, because it really does help with the YouTube algorithm and ensures more and more people can hear this message and learn about the many facets of commercial real estate. So thank you all so much for your time, and we'll see you all next time.